Hi, my name is Murdad. I'm an immigrant from Iran. I'm proud to organize for National People's Action, and I am the 99%.
I'm Sam. I'm from New York, and I'm an actions coordinator with the other 98%, and I've been proud to organize and train for Occupy Wall Street. I'm the 99%.
I'm Linda. I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, and I'm proud to have spent the last 20 years fighting for justice with the UAW. I am the 99%.
I'm Karan. I'm an immigrant from Jamaica. I've spent my organizing career working with students, people of faith, and low-wage workers. I work at the Midwest Academy where I train organizers on strategy and to build power to make real and concrete changes in people's lives. And I am the 99%.
I'm Sam, and I'm excited to welcome you to the 99% Spring video training. All across America, tens of thousands of ordinary people are coming together in living rooms and schools, community centers and union halls to take part in hundreds of trainings like this. Who are we? We are workers and the unemployed, students and retirees, immigrants and environmentalists. We are the 99%. Many of us have been involved in fights to win better jobs, better housing, better schools, and a healthy environment for many years. For others of us, this is the first time we've taken action. In the last year, new things have become possible. We all witnessed the swelling grassroots movement in support of collective bargaining rights in Wisconsin and across the country, and we've been exhilarated by the way the Occupy movement has changed the political conversation. People recognize that the concentration of wealth and power with the 1% has wrecked our economy, despoiled our environment, and corrupted our democracy. This spring, we will strengthen the movement of the 99% to win justice for ourselves, our communities, and our planet. This training is designed to be interactive. We'll signal points when you may want to hit pause to discuss the issues, participate in exercises, or simply reflect. Here's a quick preview of the agenda for today's training. We're going to tell our family stories and find in those stories the themes of broader changes affecting all of us. We'll tell our story of the 99%. After that, we'll talk about the history of nonviolent direct action and how people's movements throughout history have used its moral power to win freedom and change. We'll look at different kinds of power, theirs and ours, and how we can come together to respond as a community and not just as individuals. Finally, we'll develop concrete strategies and skills that we can use to plan and participate in nonviolent actions this spring. It's our hope that by the end of the training, you'll be more inspired, more informed, and more prepared to take effective action to win real change in our country.
We are unstoppable! Another world is possible!
Our struggle won't be easy or quick, but we can learn from those who've come before us. This is our time to make our own history. This is the 99% Spring.
We are the 99%! So are you! We are the 99%!
One reason that nonviolent direct action carries such moral force is that it's grounded in the real experience of our suffering. So we want to stay focused on what's really at stake, what exactly we want to improve in our families' day-to-day lives. When we tell our stories about how we and those we love have been affected by our broken economy and politics, it reminds us of why we're in this struggle. Our stories provide a benchmark for all of our organizing. Many of you have seen the powerful stories posted in the I Am the 99% Tumblr blog. Those stories are the story of our time and of this economy. They show the damage that the few in the 1% have done and the suffering they've created for the rest of us. But they also show our resiliency. By telling our stories, we're claiming responsibility for our own lives, casting off shame, finding courage, and building our strength as a movement of the 99%. Here are a few stories of the 99%.
My name is Tiffany Dina Lofton. My annual salary right now is about $33,000 a year. My student loan debt makes up $28,000. I don't have any sort of wealth. I don't own any houses. I have a car that I'm still paying my car note on. And I'm the oldest of three who was the first to go to college and the last to go to college. I am the 99%.
Hola, mi nombre es María Reyes, vivo en Hayward. Yo soy el 99% porque en el 2011 desafortunadamente perdimos nuestra casa y la perdimos por estos bancos corruptos que nos han dañado tanto en quitarnos nuestros hogares. Para nosotros ha sido muy frustrante a toda mi familia después de haber hecho ahorros, el sufrimiento para ahorrar, para tener un hogar, no se nos ha consolidado por todo esto que ha pasado, por las grandes corporaciones que nos han robado nuestra alegría.
My name is Alex. I've worked for Albertsons for the past 37 years. I've been in the California National Guard for 24 years serving my country. There are programs for major corporations to get into trouble to help them get relief, but none for the individual like myself who has a $480,000 loan on a house that's only worth $330,000. I am the 99%.
My name is Garland Gilchrist II. I'm from Detroit, I live in Washington, D.C., and I am the 99%. The killing of Trayvon Martin in late February and the extraordinary mass mobilization calling for justice for his family during the last month and a half is just the most recent example of how tragedies can spark movements that can change lives. Trayvon Martin was the 99%. Trayvon was a black kid walking home, wearing a hoodie, minding his own business. He's now dead because his killer saw his appearance as reason enough to follow him, shoot him, and kill him. This neglect of Trayvon's humanity was predicated upon racial prejudices and stereotypes that for generations have played themselves out in ways that threaten people's physical lives and economic livelihoods. The 99% movement must fight against inequity at every turn, on every level, against the people and policies that unfairly privilege the few. We need more than just an economy that works for the 99%. We need society to work for the entire 99%. Because I am the 99%, Trayvon Martin is the 99%. We are the 99%.
Why are stories so powerful? It's because stories remind us of what we value in the world: our family, a safe place to live, our education, our children, our earth. Stories also teach us to make choices. When we hear how others have responded to pain and challenge in their lives, we feel in our gut how we need to respond to the challenges in our own lives. We find solidarity, love, and the courage to act. There's another reason we're asking you to tell your own stories in a moment. We'll be inviting you to step up to lead others when you leave this training. We're asking you to create opportunities for non-violent direct action that will allow others in your life to find purpose, hope, and the possibility for change. And taking on leadership brings with it the responsibility of being transparent with others about who we are, where we come from, and why we're here. Telling our stories help us to do just that. So let's get started. For the next 30 minutes, we're going to ask you to break into groups of 4 and tell the story of how you've been affected by changes in our economy. After you break into your group of 4, choose a timekeeper to keep you on track. Then, take 5 minutes to write your own story about how you've been affected by the economy, on one of the I am the 99% cards. Your story can be about something that's happening right now, about your past struggles, about the experiences of family members or others you love, or about your fears for the future. After the 5 minutes are up, go around the group and spend the next 20 minutes telling your stories to one another. Then wrap up by spending 5 minutes identifying the shared experiences in your stories. What do you have in common? How are your experiences unique? Pause the video now. We'll see you in 30 minutes. Thanks for telling your family's story. Each of our individual stories is part of a much bigger story. There are some people who will tell us our experiences are all our fault. We agree that we need to take responsibility for our part in our own family's success. But when we look at economic patterns this deep and broad, we can see that our experiences at work and home aren't just a matter of luck or hard work. This is about something much bigger than any one of us. It's about political and economic power. And right now, it's about a system that's been rigged to benefit a few at the expense of many. This spring, we're coming together to change that. We are the 99%, and we're coming together to write a new story. Let's write that story right now. Your host is going to lead you through this as a big group. Put some paper on the wall and write this story for your town or city based on the stories you've heard in the room today. Put some detail in it. We are struggling with. We work hard every day and we want a different future where? Pause the video and come back to us in 10 minutes. We are the 99%, and now we are coming together to write a new story for America.
Our movement is a movement of passive resistance, and we never intend to participate in violence. We are dependent solely on moral and spiritual forces.
If you lower yourself to the level of violence, then the strongest person wins.
A really important tool in the struggle for justice and human rights and fairness in society is nonviolent direct action.
It's always effective because it disarms the violence.
We need to build an inspiring, exciting movement and inspire people's imaginations that they can in fact be a part of redefining their own futures.
I'm one of those few people who set out to change Mississippi and change the world. Now is the time for us to make sure that we do that again. And because we did it once, I can guarantee those who are doubtful we can do it again.
On December 16, 1773, a group of British colonists in Boston protested their government's coercive policies of taxation without representation by destroying shipments of taxed tea from England. That day, they set the foundation where every generation joins the struggle to make our democracy and our economy work for all people. From the start, our country held a deep contradiction between the promise of democracy and the challenge of inequality. At the time of its founding, the United States didn't recognize the rights of the men and women they enslaved, or the rights of Native Americans whose lands had been taken to form their colonies. But individuals like Harriet Tubman rose up to fight for their very personhood. After breaking from captivity, she joined the American abolitionist movement, helping slaves gain freedom through a system of secret escape routes and safe houses known as the Underground Railroad. While plantation slavery drove the Southern economy, industrialists in the North were building the first factories in places like Lawrence, Massachusetts. As factories rose, immigrants arrived from all over Europe in search of a better future.
In 1912, the conditions of work for the textile workers in Lawrence and Lowell were deteriorating. Conditions in the factories were terrible. People began to come together to say, we've got to do something. Radical leadership from the industrial workers of the world, William D. Haywood and Rose Schneiderman and others, came to Lawrence and Lowell to try to figure out what to do. And the what to do ultimately was to bring everybody out on strike and say enough is enough, because people had a sense of their culture, a sense of what they needed beyond pay and decent conditions. And so she spoke eloquently to this mass of people saying, we need bread and roses too. You have to have the sustenance, but you have to have the culture and intellectual sustenance if we're going to be human beings. And that was a really clear statement of a working class vision of the future.
Workers weren't the only Americans seeking recognition as full human beings. After decades of effort, a new generation of suffragists led by Alice Paul and Lucy Burns founded the National Women's Party. They directly confronted President Wilson, picketing the White House, marching in the streets of Washington, D.C., suffering imprisonment and force feeding before finally winning women's right to vote in 1920. Meanwhile, greedy bankers and industrialists drove the economy to an unprecedented stock market crash in 1929, setting off the Great Depression. Those who still had jobs were exploited, and by 1936, they'd had enough.
Terrible conditions, unbelievably long hours, lots of injuries, no workers' compensation, no real protection or social safety net for the workers. And finally, the workers had enough. And so they put together a very strategic plan. They went in there and they sat down, they took it over very peacefully, taking on the most powerful corporation in the world. They had tremendous support from the community. They had support from churches, they had support from great women's brigade that came out, which made up of spouses of a lot of the workers, but also other women from the community. And then they maintained their presence there until General Motors had agreed to recognize their union and bargain with them. And when they marched out with a big American flag, and everybody said they could not win against the most powerful corporation in the world, but through nonviolent, direct action, workers standing together, solidarity, they did win.
By the 1930s, Americans won protection for the elderly, the sick, and the poor with the Social Security Act. The National Labor Relations Act and the Fair Labor Standards Act made it easier for some workers to organize unions. While some began to realize the American dream, people of color, many of them farm laborers or domestic workers, were explicitly excluded. Legalized segregation and discrimination continued to shape our democracy and our economy. African American soldiers returned from World War II to the same Jim Crow laws they had left behind. They were relegated to separate restrooms and restaurants, barred from decent employment, and forced to walk to the back of the bus for a seat.
Rosa Parks was a brilliantly trained organizer who has been historically misrepresented as this nice, timid little seamstress. Rosa Parks was much more radical than any of us ever came to realize.
On December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks, who'd been trained in direct action at the Highlander School in Tennessee, was arrested for refusing to give up her seat on a bus to a white man. In protest, Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., and others organized a 381-day boycott of the Montgomery bus system. The wins in Montgomery and elsewhere motivated hundreds of young people, black and white, to organize the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Many were trained by James Lawson and Ella Baker. Thousands of young people risked their lives in lunch counter sit-ins, marches, freedom rides, and voter registration drives.
Jim Lawson is the most effective, the most celebrated and the person that I'm most proud of as the person who really began teaching nonviolence in Tennessee. He follows on a confrontational, constructive change of society. Nonviolence was the most effective way. That movement was the beginning of a process that says, what do you mean you haven't been to jail yet? What's wrong with you?
Inspired by the civil rights movement, Mexican and Filipino farm workers who did the backbreaking work to put food on our tables started organizing too.
Farm workers were getting paid 70 cents an hour. There were no toilets in the fields for workers. There was no drinking water. They didn't have the right to organize. Well, from the very beginning, we made a commitment that we would organize the union through nonviolence, and that was pretty much the doctrine and the philosophy that we organized under.
On St. Patrick's Day, Thursday, March 17, 1966, striking grape pickers from Delano began a 300-mile pilgrimage northward.
So all of those boycotts were very successful because women, children, all of the public, it's easy for them to get involved because it is a nonviolent action. Something like 17 million Americans stopped eating grapes, and the growers had to come to the bargaining table.
Decades of organizing created more economic and political opportunity for millions. But by 1970, corporate America had organized to hold on to their power. Part of their strategy was to enter a state of permanent, publicly funded war to advance corporate interests overseas and rake in billions in taxpayer dollars for defense contracts. Some movements, such as the Students for a Democratic Society, were brave enough to stand in their way.
Early 1980s, I was part of a mass movement that recognized that President Reagan had brought us to the verge of nuclear war together with the Soviet Union. We built a campaign together with faith communities, the Western Shoshone, and peace and disarmament activists from throughout the Western United States and across the country. And over 14,000 people went through trainings, were arrested protesting, and kept up the pressure until the Clinton administration was politically pressured to ban nuclear testing. They would still be testing bombs in the Nevada desert had it not been for the People Power campaign.
In the 1980s, while pharmaceutical companies made record profits, victims of AIDS were asked to pay up to $10,000 per year for medication. In the face of government condemnation and indifference, gay activists started organizing.
The CBS Evening News, Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. We're going to take a break for a commercial now.
No one knew what was going on in the community, and all these young men were getting sick and getting sicker with all these opportunistic infections, with all these malignancies that they should not have. You had a leader, Ronald Reagan, who was silent on the issue, who allowed himself to be shackled into not talking about what eventually would become the biggest health crisis of our time. From the developing success of the work that GMHC was doing, Larry Kramer, one of the founders, helped form ACT UP, a very politically active, policy-oriented organization that used nonviolent direct action to bring about change. One of the most famous slogans that came out of ACT UP is silence equals death, meaning that what you don't do is going to lead to the death of many other people.
And as corporations exploited our natural resources, activists stood up to stop them.
Redwood Summer was planned in response to the timber companies that were cutting at 3 times the rate of growth. So our plan with Redwood Summer was to block every tree from being cut down that we could. The plan was to physically slow them down using nonviolent civil disobedience, to put out a nationwide call for students and retired people and anybody who could come to come in the summer and engage in nonviolent civil disobedience. We thought that with the eyes of the nation on us, people don't really think that they should cut down 2,000-year-old trees.
Another critical corporate strategy in the 1980s and 1990s was to globalize capital, making it easier for U.S. businesses to ship union jobs overseas and exploit workers in other countries. In 1999, when the World Trade Organization gathered in Seattle, people rose up.
We set up trainings, trained thousands of people in disobedience and direct action. It transformed from an organized protest into a public rebellion in that ordinary people off the street stepped up, linked arms with us. We hung tight and kept protesting throughout the week, and so the summit to further corporate power collapsed. That was a major victory in that the 1%'s plan to run the global economy through the World Trade Organization was scuttled by people power.
Corporate America doesn't only exploit workers abroad. Here at home, they take advantage of millions of low-wage workers who live in the shadows because they are immigrants. In 2006, hundreds of thousands of immigrant workers took to the streets to stand up for themselves and their families.
What worked in Wisconsin was the same thing. It was a sit-down.
People came together and said, we're not going to live with this governor. He was about to introduce legislation, which he had not made public, to basically eviscerate, cut, destroy collective bargaining.
The students and labor and this broad coalition of people who care about democracy that came together.
You had this amazing coming together that I don't think anybody has ever seen.
What the oil companies didn't bank on was people power. Did a series of sit-ins at the White House. It involved religious leaders and religious denominations. It involved youth and students. It involved grandmothers, teachers, farmers, indigenous native elders. That action ended up being so dramatic that it ended up catalyzing a whole campaign through the next several months to put a stop to the Keystone XL oil pipeline.
We would end the tyranny of oil.
In 2010, the Supreme Court rewards the greedy bankers and speculators who sent our economy into a tailspin just 2 years earlier.
Something has to change. We can't take it anymore. We want accountability. Stand up, rise up, and let's make a revolution happen.
People were really frustrated, and Wall Street has been the heart of the problem.
This movement that's spreading all around the country, it's really saying that we want a different kind of democracy, and we want it now.
Banks got bailed out. We got sold out.
If you care about the direction that this country is going, and you have the capacity to get here, this is the place to be right now.
We are unstoppable. Another world is possible.
Student debt is rising. People are getting kicked out of their homes. And this is reaction towards the economic inequality that has been happening in the country for the past couple decades right now.
And I'd like us all to stand in solidarity and let's give each other an applaud and together and as one.
The doors of the house is open. Come on in. Come on in. The doors of the house is open.
We got sold out. Banks got bailed out. We got sold out.
I do believe in getting involved and fighting back and standing up for what you believe in.
We are sick and tired of the foreclosures, and we're fighting back. One home at a time, if it has to be.
This will be something that I'm going to dedicate myself to do so other families won't have to go through what I'm going through.
And it is very, very important that we understand at this time in American history, our greatest asset is us.
There's a need for us to come together in a more profound way.
People have power, and when we organize and take action, we can make change.
We've got to be the ones that will make it happen. And all we have to do is commit our time.
This is what democracy is. This is what democracy is about.
The most precious thing that we have in our lives is our time. And when we give up our time to make things change, to do the organizing, that is really the only solution.
We never know exactly what's going to happen in any action scenario, but one thing we can control is ourselves and the choices that we make. One of the keys to nonviolent direct action is how we embody our values when we are taking action. The challenge is, sometimes the thing that brings us to the point of direct action affects us so deeply that when we're attacked or provoked, we feel cornered, we're angry, we don't think straight, we lose it. We all have triggers we have to contend with, but when we engage in direct action, we are also surfacing deep, underlying tensions. Our actions bring those tensions to the surface so that we can all see exactly what's going on. Surfacing tension can expose conflict, and it's our responsibility to engage in conflict in a way that's disciplined, that's grounded in the goals that we're trying to achieve, as well as our core values. Responding with intention and control to conflict does not come naturally. It can be learned, though. Here's an example of a role-play exercise we use to practice nonviolence in the face of unpredictable response.
So now we're going to practice, because anytime we're taking nonviolent direct action, it means we're going to be interacting with someone, right? And it's up to us to figure out how those interactions go down. So we're going to practice. So what I want you guys to do is make 2 parallel lines on either side of this invisible line, so facing each other in pairs. Reach across, shake the hand of the person across from you. Make sure everyone's got a partner. All right, so what's about to happen is that I want everyone on this side of the line. You guys are activists, and you are going to Megabank because your home has been foreclosed on, and you are going to Megabank to close your account, and you are going to tell everyone why. You're going to hand out flyers. You're going to make sure people really know it. You're going to close your account because you've been the victim of this bank. Everyone on this side, you guys are managers at Megabank. You're just trying to do your job. Whatever it is what you need more than anything is for your job to work out. You need these people to just be quiet and to go away. You know, like whatever your thing is important, but you need them to go away, and you need them to go away now. So whatever you need to do to make them go away, that's what you need to do. No touching. Take a second, close your eyes, think about who you are and what you want out of this situation. Open your eyes. Go.
I am here to withdraw all my money out of this account. You guys are frauds and thieves.
You need to go away.
I want my account closed today. I want my account closed today. No, this is you guys are absolutely the most horrible institution I have ever met.
I got the form right here. I'm trying to.
All right, stop. Take a step back. Now we're going to talk about choices, because so much of what we do when we take nonviolent direct action is we're putting ourselves in situations and creating situations that we actually have more control of than sometimes we like to admit. Because when we're raising conflict out of situations, we're in it because we have really strong feelings about it. We have reactions that we think are natural and that just like come up. What we want to be able to do is control our reactions and make choices that make sense. So if I want to escalate a situation, if I want to like rile people up and get it there, some of the tactics can be like what we just saw. Fingers in face, getting up in someone's face. That heats it up, right? Now we're going to practice, how do we cool it down? How do we cool down someone in front of us who's in a place? And how do we take it and not react to them, but make choices that move them to a different place? So again, this side, bank manager. And this time you can start in a higher place. You are in the middle of like, this is a bad day. I just had another person try and take out their money. I'm surrounded by activists. Get the hell out of my bank. You guys, it's your responsibility for the purpose of this exercise to calm it down. You don't want anyone going to jail. You don't want anyone getting hurt or in trouble. You need to calm it down. So think about how you do that. What are the choices that you're going to make with your hands? What are the choices you're going to make with your face? How are you going to interact? What kind of words are you going to use? What kind of body language? You know, what kind of body language are you going to use? So again, they're reacting, you're choosing. Close your eyes. Take a second to think about who you are and what you need out of this situation.
There are a couple of important things to take away from all this. First of all, we always have choices about how we respond to conflict. We can heat things up or cool things down. We can speak or not speak. We can decide how we move, how we look, where we look, how loud our voices are. Our choices need to be informed by our objectives in that interaction. Sometimes we want to rile things up. Sometimes we need to keep things calm and safe. The important thing to remember is that we're the ones who have the choices and they're the ones reacting to us. Part of the power of nonviolence is that it brings us physically into the same vicinity as those who make decisions that can change our families' lives. That vicinity brings with it an opportunity to engage at a human level with those decision makers. In that moment, our choices about how we act, what we say, how we move will reveal our values. Then there are practical techniques. For example, our tone of voice matters, but it also depends on the context. We usually don't want to get into a yelling match, so maintaining a calm tone with a medium volume is often very helpful, but not always. Sometimes someone just won't stop yelling at you. Another option is to meet the volume of their voice, but then as you talk, slowly lower it in stages. They may follow you. All of these things are dependent on the context that you're in, so knowing what to do and how to do it will often depend on how well you're listening to the other person, not just how well you argue. It's important to remember that when we're de-escalating, we're not necessarily trying to win the other person to our side at that particular moment. We're just trying to calm down a conflict. Explaining to someone why you're doing what you're doing may be interesting once the situation has already calmed down, but it's not always the best strategy. Instead, you can tell them this is a peaceful protest to emphasize the fact that you're not a threat. Posture is important too. Sometimes activists mistakenly believe that holding their hands behind their backs in the military at ease position is non-threatening, but it can actually make it look as though you're concealing something. Folding your arms or hands on hips can look unintentionally defiant. Choosing a posture that communicates what you're doing is an intentional act. Try standing in a position that's non-threatening but strong. Your hands are probably visible but relaxed. Your feet are probably strongly planted. The key thing is we always have choices about how we behave and react to the things around us. And it's important that our choices flow from our most deeply held core values.
Nonviolent direct action is about us, standing up for ourselves, organizing our power together, and making choices that change the world. It's how ordinary people organize our resources into collective power. Through direct action, we directly confront, disrupt, or disobey situations or institutions that we oppose as morally unjust. But actions that change the world don't happen in a vacuum. They are grounded in a specific historical moment and in specific relationships of power between real people. In other words, they're part of a well-thought-out strategy. When we enter into nonviolent direct action and ask others to follow us, we have the responsibility to make it strategic and not just expressive. If we are asking others to take risks, we need to be clear who could create the change we want and what our theory is about how our actions could shift the landscape to make that change possible. Let's take a look at one of the most famous examples of nonviolent direct action in American history. Rosa Parks refusing to move to the back of the bus in Montgomery, Alabama in 1955. We all know the story, at least we think we do. The problem is, the story many of us learned from our history books is inaccurate. We're told that Mrs. Parks was an old woman with tired feet who had had enough and decided she just wasn't going to get up from her seat. That simple choice raised national awareness about the evils of segregation and ignited a movement. Now, looking at that famous picture, did you ever wonder how a professional photographer happened to take such a well-composed picture of a completely spontaneous individual action? The answer is it wasn't spontaneous. Rosa Parks was trained in nonviolent direct action. She worked with others at a place called the Highlander Center in Tennessee to build a strategy to take on segregation. Her action, refusing to give up her seat, was one piece of that strategy. We can use the example of Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott to understand vision, goals, strategies, and tactics. Your vision is the world you imagine we could live in. Your goal is the specific change you're aiming for that will begin to make your vision real and observable. Your strategy is your theory about how to achieve your goal, and your tactics are the pieces of your plan. The vision of the civil rights movement was to achieve racial equality and justice in America, a vision held by generations of Americans and one many of us continue to struggle toward today. As we understand it, the goal in Montgomery was to make that vision real by desegregating Montgomery buses. Now, that's not something that's going to be done by one woman refusing to give up her seat on a bus unless her action is the catalyst for a much bigger campaign. And in this case, of course, it was. When Rosa Parks was arrested, other leaders rallied around her and formed an organization called the Montgomery Improvement Association. Their strategy, as we understand it, had two elements. In part, it was to dramatize the realities of segregation and its inherent injustice. But it was also to bring economic pressure to bear on the city and its bus companies. To advance their strategy, they decided on the tactic of a bus boycott. At first, the plan was for a one-day boycott the following Monday. For that one day, they would ask all the Black people in Montgomery, Alabama, not to ride the buses. Movement leaders like Joanne Robinson and E.D. Nixon spent all weekend organizing to get the word out, and when Monday rolled around, the buses in Montgomery were nearly empty. Because who were the biggest customers for the Montgomery bus system? African Americans. Following the success of the one-day boycott, the Montgomery Improvement Association escalated its tactics and extended the boycott. It went on for more than a year before the movement won and Montgomery's buses were integrated. The bus companies in the city might have been able to shrug off a one-day boycott, but by sustaining the boycott for more than a year, the civil rights movement organized the resources controlled by Montgomery's black citizens, all those 10-cent fares, into a collective force that the city and the bus companies couldn't ignore. The sustained boycott also built the broader movement by creating an opportunity for tens of thousands of people to participate. While it's true that nonviolent direct action can function like a spotlight, drawing attention to an issue, Black people in the South hardly needed to be educated about the evils of segregation. It was the opportunity to act, extended to people who may never have thought of themselves as activists before, that made the bus boycott such an effective tactic. Our purpose isn't simply to engage in action, but to create actions that allow many others to join us and that use our people power to make concrete improvements in our lives, something we can see, touch, smell, or feel.
We need to begin planning our action. Planning direct action is like any other kind of planning. It requires purpose, intentionality, and discipline. Tools and checklists can help. Practice is also necessary. So we're going to give you a planning tool to start planning your own action that you can then practice with your friends and family. If there's a local campaign that you're already working on, that's fantastic. Feel free to use it in the exercises that follow. If anyone in your group is working on a local campaign, take 2 minutes to describe it to the rest of the group. Explain what the issue is, what you've already done, and who you're working with, and what you hope to achieve. If you don't have a specific campaign or action in mind at this moment, here's an example you can work from. Home foreclosures are a major problem in many communities, not just for homeowners, but also for renters. Let's say the goal in your community is to end unjust foreclosures and get a certain bank to negotiate fairly with homeowners. You've tried to help homeowners call the bank, but they always get someone different on the other end and can't seem to get anywhere. You're looking for a way to take your action directly to Megabank, which you know from your survey of your community is responsible for a number of foreclosures. How will the action you create move you closer to your campaign goal? What will it look like, feel like, sound like, and what will be the demand? What is your power? And most importantly, what type of action would create opportunity for many, many other people to join in this campaign? Break into small groups and make sure that everyone has a copy of the action planning exercise that's part of your training packet. It breaks planning down into a number of specific steps with questions to think about for each step. For this exercise, your group can either use a local campaign or the mega bank example that we gave you. Go through the steps in the action planning exercise one by one. Think about whatever campaign you're using as your example. Discuss each step as a group, but each individual should write down their own answers. If your answer to a question is, I don't know, then try to figure out what you'd need to do to find out. Now, appoint a timekeeper. Pause the video and get to work planning your action. Obviously, we don't have enough time to do all the work that goes into strategic action planning, but that's okay. Building smart, creative, move-in actions that advance your strategy takes practice. This exercise is intended to give you a chance to plan an action and to practice it. Think about the stories we all told earlier today. How will people's stories be a part of this action too? So let's get started. Identify people in your room to play all the roles in the action. Then try it out and see what happens. How did your role play go? The reason we practice is that nothing ever goes 100%. The more we practice before we're in a real action, the more prepared we can be for any scenario. Thank you for just jumping in and trying it out.
The next step is to go out and act. When this video stops, the real work begins. Take some time now to go around the room as one big group and make a clear follow-up plan for the next 6 weeks. Who will coordinate action and who wants to join that team? Who will coordinate recruitment and outreach? Who wants to join that team? Who wants to coordinate online and traditional media? And who will join that team? And we all know that campaigns require us to organize our resources together: food, money, tools, and so on. So who would like to coordinate the resource team and who will join them? And when will all of you meet again in the next few days to get together, moving towards action? Pause the video and resume when you have your basic follow-up plan in place. Thank you for joining the 99% Spring. By participating in this training, you're making history. Never before has training for nonviolent direct action been attempted at anything approaching this scale. But this isn't training just for training's sake. It's training to inspire and empower us as the 99% to take action for a more just economy. If you don't know of any actions planned in your community and need ideas, there's an action calendar and campaign toolkits on the 99% Spring website. You can start by spreading the word. Share this video with your family and your friends. Help build the movement of the 99% as we use our hands, our hearts, our bodies, our minds, and our souls to forge a better future. Because it's time. It's time to demand an economy that works for us. It's time to reclaim our democracy. It's time for the 99% Spring.